Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are today. Thank you so much for joining Axiom for our webinar today. We're going to be talking about going mobile. I'm Robin Merritt. I'm an Executive Vice President at Axiom. And again, wow, thank you so much for joining. For all of you that are returning, that have joined our webinars before, thank you. I actually see some new folks that are first timers, and we really appreciate everybody joining us today. Now, of course, it won't just be me. I will be hosting the webinar. I am very lucky today because I have two distinguished guests with me. One is Andrew Gates. He's one of our senior consultants. He's based in the UK. If you joined us last, let's see, February, you would have joined the webinar on the workforce management vendor landscape. Andrew Gates was with us. He heads up our vendor information panel, VIP, as you'll hear me say. And we are so lucky. Andrew, welcome.
Thanks, Robin, and hi, everybody.
Great. So along with Andrew, who we also had last time, was Bob Clements. Bob Clements is our CEO and president of Axiom. And most of you know us, has had many years of experience, not that you're old, Bob, not by any means, but many years of experience in workforce management in all different ways, building his own, implementing, and now being our CEO and president. So Bob, welcome.
Thanks so much, Robin. I appreciate it.
So going mobile, what does that really mean? That seems so easy, right? Doesn't everybody have a mobile device? In fact, doesn't everybody have more than one device? I'm sure your kids and all of our frontline workers probably have some sort of mobility applications and devices like phones and iPads. And so people are using them in their day-to-day life, just like you and I do, right? So whether it's apps that we're using for grocery shopping, especially more now, right? Everybody has a device. They're using it. What does that mean? That means they're probably using it in your sites and your locations, even if you haven't gone mobile yet. So then what does that mean? All of the security issues that might be happening, the shadow IT issues that I know your IT team has probably talked to you about. There are so many different things that are happening inside the stores because mobility is accessible to almost everyone. Now, what are you going to do about it? And how can we help you? So we've spent, 12 something years already thinking about mobility. This isn't just something we've been doing over the last couple of years. We've had a lot of experience with vendors as they're coming up into this category, with workforce management vendors who are adding this into their system and their modules. So all of that experience with vendor selections, strategy discussions, road mapping, implementations have all come together today so that we can provide you with a lot of information in different categories. Now, if you joined us last time when we were talking about the workforce management vendor landscape, we went into pretty deep discussions around the capabilities, the future, and the roadmap of these vendors. This space, the mobility space, happens to be pretty crowded in a lot of different ways with a lot of different functionality. So we're going to try to break that down for you so that you understand. We're not going to go as deep as we did with those workforce management vendors, but we're going to get to at least the categories so you can have more information when you walk away today after these 45 minutes of just, okay, I get it. We're scraping the surface. I need to do some more research. That's our plan today, is to give you as much as we can in this time period. Now, I could keep going forever and tell you more about all of the different things you're going to learn, but why don't we just start learning them? And what are we already in? I've taken up 6 minutes, so let's get going. How about that? So Andrew, I'm going to start with you. I'm looking down because I see you on my screen there, so I'll put you up here. Andrew, why would we even talk about this topic? I mean, mobile's easy and it's embedded in my workforce management tools. And look at this picture I see. When I first started, it's a phone. So doesn't everybody have a mobile solution already kind of in front of them and with their workforce management solution? So Andrew, I'll kick it off. Why don't you kick us off there?
Yeah, sure. So it's true that all the workforce management solutions that are on the market today, certainly the market leader workforce management solutions, do have a mobile offering. And what we would always say to our clients is that when reviewing your mobile strategy, if you do already have a workforce management system, then our recommendation is to start with reviewing the capabilities of what that workforce management solution can do today. So there are some benefits of going down that path and of utilizing the tool that you already have. And kind of among those benefits are things like native integration. So it does avoid what can be complex integration and bespoke integration when you introduce a different platform. And you would avoid doing that if you utilize the native functions of your workforce management system. And kind of linked to that is reduced cost. So part of that is to do with the integration that I've just referenced, but also things like licensing. Typically, it's cheaper to license the workforce management capabilities within your WFM system rather than to procure a separate platform. And also the speed to deploy. So it's often quicker from a technical perspective. It can be quicker to enable that rather than to bring in a kind of a separate system. But then there's also simplicity. So from a troubleshooting perspective, it can be more straightforward. You know, if there's less systems involved, it's easier to get to the bottom of a problem. Likewise, it can simplify a training strategy because you're just training out a single solution. And then there's, from a vendor perspective, kind of procurement and relationship management of those vendors is kind of simplified by taking kind of a vendor out of the picture and having just your workforce management vendor. And I think for those reasons, that is a kind of a picture that we see a lot within Europe. So we tend to see a lot of organizations opting to use their workforce management system for their mobile offering for their employees. But we are starting to see exceptions emerge within the European market and certainly elsewhere in other regions. And a lot of that is driven by organizations being more ambitious with what they want to actually offer their employees from a mobile perspective.
Well, yeah, and I think that idea of ambition kind of plays into why you might want to look someplace else. But I'll start back with the existing WFM vendors to talk about why you might want to consider a third party. And that's that the capabilities of any WFM vendor tends to vary a lot from vendor to vendor. Some WFM vendors have a very, very strong mobile solution that, a very strong mobile solution that does everything you want it to do. Other vendors may have a weaker solution in terms of capabilities. You know, most of the customers that I know, most of the clients that we've worked with that have adopted a third party started looking at a third party because the WFM vendor didn't offer some core WFM capability they wanted, like a shift billboard, for example. So you know, while I think that you're right on, Andrew, that you should start your search by looking at what your vendor offers today, what you may find is that it doesn't cover the requirements that you have. It doesn't fit with your strategy. And when you think about that strategy, it starts to get into that ambition that you mentioned, which is that many of the organizations that we've talked to, that we've worked with, want to go beyond basic WFM capability, and they want to provide more than basic WFM capability to their employees. They want to provide a more complete mobile experience. And again, WFM vendors are very good at WFM, but they don't do other things, and that may lead you into a third party.
And what does going beyond WFM mean? I mean,
well, yeah, fair enough. I mean, for most WFM vendors, they deliver typical WFM capabilities through a mobile device. So that might be a schedule, kind of viewing a schedule or swapping shifts. It could be viewing a time card, managing time off requests and availability. It's those types of core WFM capabilities that you're going to be able to do with your WFM vendors. But it's also a limited view of your employees' work-life interaction, right? One of the most obvious ones is communication, which is if I need to talk with a peer, talk to a manager, you know, I'm going to text message them or pick up the phone and talk to them. Maybe, you know, that the phone's rarely used for actually talking these days. But communication between peers and with my manager and with my subordinates is kind of one of those obvious things that most WFM vendors don't offer out of the box. And you might need to get a third-party solution for. And that communication, you know, goes beyond simply the peer-to-peer manager to subordinate relationship. More and more, we're seeing companies get tremendous value by creating a shorter link between corporate communication and the front line. How can corporate users communicate more directly with the associates, whether that's talking about a promotion or a new policy or you know, even talking to them about how they're handling COVID, when they're shutting down a store, when they're opening back up, or a natural disaster like a hurricane. Communication becomes vital to that.
And what we're also seeing is that communication is kind of an important piece of that, but it's we're ever increasingly seeing more and more kind of functionality kind of moving into this space, really. So communication kind of scratches the surface of what there is. You know, other examples include things like data management. So kind of using your mobile platform as a form of kind of HR portal to keep personnel records and details up to date, as well as using it for kind of a repository for documents. So things like policies and procedural documents that you might want your employees to have easy access to. Again, they might be able to do that within the same mobile platform. And that kind of moves also into kind of content deployment and content feedback. So things like training, for example, being able to run all your training materials and store all your training materials through your mobile platform and track the progress. You know, are people actually carrying out that training? As well as surveys. So if you want to gather information from your employees, potentially on the training that they've just done or on other topics, then again, you could look to do that within your mobile platform. And then there's more kind of operational things. So this is really kind of on shift kind of activities and things like task management. So centralized tasks that need to be tracked and need to be kind of recorded. Again, being able to do that through that platform, as well as other things. You know, we're seeing things like, and this is a word that I heard many years ago. I never thought I would use it, but gamification. Who knew? It's a real thing. You know, kind of badges, leaderboards, rewards. Being able to kind of encourage positive behavior for your employees, as well as stuff like direct pay. So where employees want to draw down their pay based on the hours that they've worked and have more freedom to manage that is something that we're seeing as well.
So employers want to do all of these things, and maybe you don't want to do all of them. You want to do bits and pieces of them. And so you're kind of left with two choices. One is you can give your employee a bunch of apps to work with, right? One for task, one for gamification, one for direct pay, another one for WFM. Or you can start to consolidate that. And there's a lot of benefits of consolidating. First of all, and this is kind of the key benefit that I think unlocks everything else. By bringing everything together, or by bringing most functionality together into a common mobile app, what you're going to be doing is you're going to drive traffic, right? That you're going to drive use of the solution. You're going to create better engagement and adoption of the solution. What we've seen time and time again with the mobile projects that we've been involved with is that you need a reason to come into the application every day to do it. And maybe that reason is scheduling, or maybe that reason is time cards, or maybe that reason is time off. But you need a reason to get into the schedule or get into that application every day. But then once you're in, what's going to keep you engaged? Not that you want people focused on the phone, but you also don't want them to jump around a whole lot, because by bringing people to that one location, you're going to increase your ROI, you're going to increase the benefit of the solution. Also, by consolidating apps, by having fewer apps, you're reducing the amount of training that's involved. You know, the apps themselves should be easy to use in and of themselves. I mean, it's one of the beauties of mobile in general, right? We don't have training manuals for how to use an app. And you shouldn't have to in a business environment either. But what you do end up with is you end up with multiple user experiences, and by having multiple apps that you use less frequently, it kind of requires you to think a little bit about, oh yeah, where's that function? Where's that thing I wanted to do? So by consolidating, you're reducing the amount of training and the kind of improving productivity associated with the apps. And then last but not least, by consolidating, you're lowering your cost. Now, Andrew said earlier, hey, if you start by looking at what your WFM does, it's going to be lower cost than adding on a third party. And for the most part, that's absolutely true. But where you start to lose that is if I start then adding on lots of apps from different vendors. Now all of a sudden I'm paying for 3, 4, 5 apps as opposed to one app, which is really what we want to accomplish here. So ultimately you do get a lower cost the more robust your your mobile strategy is.
Okay, that's great. That's going beyond WFM. That makes a lot of sense. I like that you both got to use the word gamification. That was a nice use of it. Yes, because we probably don't use it enough in our life and we need it more. I'm going to ask something because I feel like this might be a pretty big question that everybody might have on their mind, right? Look, it's so accessible. Mobility is what it is for a reason. I mean, the naming of it, it's just, I can access this anytime, right? I can get my information at any time. I mean, I really do wish there was a lockdown on like Amazon. So at midnight when I wake up that I don't buy a pair of shoes and you could lock me out, but it doesn't seem to work that way. What about this for workforce management as an employee? I might be working off the clock. I might be, because I'm excited about it, because I'm engaged, because I want to, right? But there could be some liability here, and I'm excited. I like it, but I'm also a little skeptical if I'm on this call thinking, yeah, this is great. I can't do it. There is way too much liability, and I guess, Andrew, you know some of those challenges, especially from where you're coming from in the UK and with Europe. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, so that is a very live discussion, and one that we have with lots of our clients. It's a conversation also that we see across different regions. So we certainly have that conversation with our European clients, but also across North America as well. And really, this is about kind of dialogue with unions and with workers' councils. And as kind of we're moving through time, that discussion is kind of maturing, and it's becoming more pragmatic as to what is reasonable, really. And what we find is that there is a kind of a breakdown of how these platforms are used, because different functions can be used in different settings and at different times. So for example, functions like kind of off the clock functions, like if you want to view your schedule, or if I want to swap a shift with a colleague, or I want to put my name forward for a shift that's come available for next week, or I've got a holiday that I want to book for a month's time. These are things that happen today. And if I want to do that and I don't have a mobile platform, I'm probably going to need to pick up the phone, or I'm going to need to make some kind of communication. It might be an email or something to my manager or to my colleague. And that's going to need to happen today. So if a mobile platform is offered, then that actually makes that process probably a lot more efficient. It probably is going to take less time. It's probably going to make my life easier. So even though I might be doing that off shift and I might be doing that at home, instead of having to call my manager, I can just submit a request. So I think that there's an ever evolving kind of acceptance that this technology is not something to be feared, but something that can be really beneficial. But at the same time, there's other categories of kind of functionality within the platforms, and there are things that are more typically associated with on the clock. So when I'm working a shift, and things like task management. So carrying out a specific task that is based on a centrally defined process that I need to follow, and I need to report back that it's completed. Well, that is not something that reasonably would be done outside of working time. That is what I'm describing as part of a working shift. So that type of function wouldn't be expected somebody wouldn't be expected to interact with that outside of their working time. Likewise with training. Training is something that it would be unreasonable to expect employees to take that on in their private time, because that is a function of work. But then there are also kind of other areas that are slightly grey, and organisations might take a different tact with how they want to approach it. And there are things like news feeds, kind of corporate news feeds. Do you want your employees to be able to see in their own time what is happening within your organisation? Well, you may want to do that, or you may want to lock that down. Likewise, communication that Bob was talking about earlier. Do you want to allow for communication between employee and manager, or is that something that should be constrained to a shift? Or do you want to allow for group chats to happen outside of working time? Likewise with surveys, do you want to allow employees or ask your employees to provide information back to the business in their private time, or is that a function of work? So there are still kind of open discussions around some of this, but it's certainly a kind of an evolving one, that's for sure.
Well, and I think there's a few tips that I can relate, or I can provide about how to stay safe and kind of how to not get yourself into trouble with this stuff as an employer. And the first is don't make the out of work stuff mandatory. One of the things that Andrew talked about was that ultimately the things that you should be allowing people to do on their personal device out of the office or out of work are things that are convenient, that they would be doing, a convenience for them, something that they would be doing outside or using another means like a phone or a text message or something like that, and allow that to continue to operate. But ultimately, people will take the most convenient path, which will be the apps that you provide. The second thing I would say is make sure that you've got a written policy for how to use personal devices and how to use the mobile devices in general, what's acceptable and what's not, and make sure that everybody's got a copy of that policy. Ultimately, that will provide very, very clear instruction. Now, in the States, something that has come up time and time again is that certain states, I can think of California, Illinois as being kind of two prime examples. They require that the employer pay for work-related expenses, which may include data fees. And so effectively, there's some obligation to help pay for your employees' cell phone bills. Now, people have interpreted this different ways, but ultimately what we've seen most of our clients do is not pay the employee's entire bill every month, but instead pay them a stipend, pay them some small amount for the data fees that they're incurring while they're using the app. So maybe that's $1 a month. It doesn't need to be a whole lot, but under kind of being clear to say, using this, we're going to give you $1 a month or whatever it might be, or $1 a month. That's more than adequate in most cases.
And something else to consider is that when we talk about mobility platforms and strategy, although we've talked a lot about your own device and bringing your own device to work or accessing the platform via your own device outside of work, it's also not just about personal devices. There's also the corporate devices, so tablets and handhelds, which you might want to encourage your managers to have a tablet when they're on the shop floor. Or you might want to install hardware, whether it's a dedicated PC or whether it's a tablet in the canteen for employees to have more access to these functions. So I think that's an important thing to consider when looking at your strategy, because obviously there's an investment associated with that, which needs to be considered. Well, Robin, you're on mute.
When you're trying to do the right thing so that there's not background noise and you don't hear me shuffling papers, and then there you go. I just wanted to let you guys know, thank you all for some of the chats we're getting. We will have some time at the end and we'll get through those. So thank you and keep sending those through. Thank you so much. Okay, so we cleared up the legalities, right? I feel like that feels better. Well, I'm sorry, we didn't clear it up. I think we gave a lot of information to think about as you're thinking about the liability. I think the one thing that I walked away with right now was, hey, it's really maybe not as hard as I thought it was. And yeah, there's a lot to think about, but once you get it in place and you start, like Bob, you said with the written policy, I think that really will start you down the path of answering the questions you need to in the areas that you are turning on mobility, states, counties, whatever it is, countries. So that I think that's helped a lot. We're going to shift gears. And now we want to bring in some more information around the vendors. Now, like I said earlier, this is very crowded. So we can't talk about every single mobility application and company that is and vendor that's out there. So Bob and Andrew are going to walk us through what I think is the right way to think about the different vendors. So now what I'd like to do is, as well as I just got off mute, let's see if I can now share this with you. And I'll just show you a quick screen. Again, you'll see Andrew and Bob still out there on the panel, and we'll leave it on for just a little bit so you can write these down and have the information about it. So here we go. And I'm sure, Bob, you guys will let me know what you're seeing, if we see the right thing. Notes or presentation?
Presentation.
Great, look at this.
Well done.
A successful day. Okay, now the next thing is advancing to that slide. Here we go. All right, so the mobility space today, and I'll turn it over to you guys to start. And I believe, Andrew, why don't you start us with what we know, right? The workforce management vendors today.
Yeah, sure. So as you kind of say, Robin, this is a very kind of complex landscape. It's also one that has evolved a lot and is ever changing. So for the purpose of this webinar and for keeping things simple, we've kind of come up with two categories. So the first is, as just shown on the screen there, the workforce management vendors. And this is really kind of summarizing a bit about those vendors. And then Bob will talk a little bit about the mobile first platforms, which is our kind of second category. Now focusing on the WFM vendors, just a few kind of things of kind of general note really, which is that what we find is that there are different levels of kind of capability and maturity across the landscape, and also different levels of accessibility. So some vendors have opted not to provide a native app, whereas others have, as an example. But what we find is within this kind of category, there are sort of two groups that you could break it down into. The first group being the WFM vendors with mobile WFM capabilities. And these are really your kind of vendors like UKG, Infor, Blue Yonder. And this is where you really have kind of the main application that is also available in mobile form, and ever increasingly so. So the capabilities that you have in that platform are ever increasingly available in an app, in a mobile platform of some description. And what we find is that the kind of the usual suspects of functionality is what we kind of see in this area, and Bob kind of mentioned them a bit earlier on today, but things like viewing a schedule, a time card, shift swapping, open billboards, and kind of being able to kind of put yourself forward for open shifts. Also things like requesting time off, which has been kind of reasonably standard for quite some time now. But then we have like clocking, and what we're seeing is increasingly so more kind of geo-fenced restrictions put around that, which mean that you can only clock in based on where you are physically located at that point in time. It stops you from kind of clocking in from bed. And then task management capabilities, which is definitely an area of divergence. There is kind of a variable scale of capabilities for sure in that area across the platforms. But they are kind of, if you like, the workforce management functionality kind of categories, if you like. But then what we have as well is a second group, which is sort of the workforce management vendors with mobile WFM capabilities, but also broader engagement capabilities. And this is where we're starting to see WFM vendors that are offering mobility capabilities that are broader than what we would typically say is just workforce management. And this is things like more of an emphasis on communication and messaging. So kind of more comprehensive, kind of direct and group messaging capabilities, being able to kind of share files and images within those chats is what we're starting to see. And examples of that is more kind of your Quinix and your Legion that offer this type of functionality. And I'm going to say it again, it'll be the third time on this webinar, but gamification, which is awarding your employees for positive behavior via badges and those types of functions is again something else that we're starting to see with some of the WFM vendors.
That's great. So now we're ready to move to the next category, right, Bob? And those are mobile first vendors, I think is the way we're saying.
Yeah, and really this is, as crowded as the workforce management field is, this is even more crowded. And, we're throwing some logos up on the screen here, but arguably we are only scratching the surface. And what we see is that the mobile first vendors, and again, we've kind of lumped it into this general category of mobile first, but kind of they all do a little bit of a different thing. So, backing up for a minute, as you start thinking about what do we want to do with mobile, you really need to get an idea of what it is you want to provide before you start going out and looking at the vendors. Because again, they all do something a little bit different. And let me kind of explain what I mean here. And I'll start by picking on our friends over at Shift. Shift with a Y there. And Shift was one of the early movers in the third-party mobile space. And we've seen adoption at some very large customers of the Shift solution. It does communication and messaging, it does shift management, shift swapping, that type of thing. And it's rolling out kind of the ability to clock in and clock out on the mobile device as well. It's a really good replacement for kind of the WFM mobile capability. And it's ideal when you look at what when you say, hey, I want to provide that mobile WFM capability, but I'm not real happy with what it is that my existing WFM system provides. Or maybe it's you've got multiple WFM systems in different facilities and you want to provide a common user experience. In those cases, something like Shift is really an ideal solution for that. Another one that was also an early adopter, another vendor that was also an early adopter in the space and continues to evolve is Branch. Branch came out of kind of the Target incubator up in Minneapolis and came out offering kind of that shift management capability early on, but they also offered daily pay. So that's the idea that if I work a shift, I can get kind of I can get paid in between the normal pay cycle. And as Branch has evolved, they've become more and more focused on the daily pay capability, and that's kind of where they focus. And there's other vendors that have come on that offer kind of, I don't want to say the same capability, but similar capability in terms of the shift management, the time piece, the communication piece, people like Crew and Prosper and things like that. And when we think about these third parties, probably one that offers a more complete solution in terms of breadth of capability is WorkJam. WorkJam kind of offers the shift management capabilities and the messaging capabilities, offers task management, offers learning, a wide breadth of what they refer to as workplace orchestration capabilities on that mobile device. And there is a lot that falls kind of in between, if you will, in terms of what the capabilities are. And these are just kind of native mobile apps that, we're also seeing new apps arrive on the screen, or new capabilities that arrive on the screen or scene that are more voice driven. So for example, kind of our friend and industry veteran Steve Levy, who helped found Think Time, has founded a new organization called A Voice, which is a voice-driven mobile solution that, again, just is a different take on this. We're also starting to see some, we're not starting to see, but we're seeing some very big consumer and enterprise brands like Microsoft and Facebook provide mobile capabilities as well that work with the WFM and add on to as well. So this is a crowded space, but I think the key is to understand really what you want to do, what your strategy is with mobile.
And also, Bob, not just to think about what you want to do today, but to consider what you want to do in 6, 12, 18, 24 months time, because I think that is, it's important that the platform that you're on is going to give you that scalability to potentially, and you don't necessarily need to offer everything on day one, but it's something to consider as well.
Absolutely.
Right. That roadmap is probably more important here than any other time that you've taken in any other roadmap, right? Because there is so much to be able to offer here. Well,
Absolutely.
with that, I also know that it's like downloading an app onto our phones. It's easy, it's quick. I can implement this very, very fast, and I get an ROI pretty fast on it. Or at least that's what I hear all the time. And I guess, Andrew, is that really true? Can I do it really fast?
So yeah, I think broadly that's a fair statement, but I think that certainly when activating kind of native WFM functionality, also even when implementing other solutions, it's something that can be done reasonably quickly. There is some complexity to it, but I think that my kind of comment to that would be probably a little less focused maybe on the technical side of it, and more thinking about the kind of the change side of it, because that is something that can't be forgotten here. You're going to be rolling it out to a wide range of users, your employees, in terms of, there's going to be a wide range of age, of technical capability, and that spectrum is going to be vast. And so you want to ensure that the way that is managed means that the kind of the younger worker that's kind of anxiously waiting for this so they can get their hands on it is just as comfortable as the person that is not so comfortable with technology, and maybe needs a bit more kind of support through that transition. And what we would say is that kind of monitoring and tracking usage, especially in the early days, is quite key, because that is something that will help you to focus in on areas that are kind of not kind of rolling out as successfully.
Well, and you know what, I'm going to take a little bit of a detour here for a minute, because one of the questions that came in fits in with exactly what you just said, which is to monitor tracking and usage. So one of the attendees asked about target adoption rates. What should we be seeing when we're tracking and monitoring? What should we be seeing in terms of adoption? And generally speaking, what I would expect to see is somewhere between 80 and 90% adoption. When we've looked at successful implementations, what we see is a very high percentage of the employees have downloaded and logged into the application. And that's really kind of the first measure of adoption, is what percentage has downloaded the application and what percentage have logged into the application from their mobile device. The second area that you want to then track is how many weekly and daily users do you have? Again, it's kind of a percentage of the whole. And again, we should expect to see a very high number of daily users. Now, your mileage may vary depending on who your demographic of your employee is and things like that. That more mobile-centric users, particularly younger users, or if you've got a lot of those employees, you should see a higher adoption rate with them. But the more important thing is, if you are not seeing adoption, you need to ask why. You need to say, well, what is it why aren't people using the system? So for example, a while back, we ended up rolling out a mobile WFM capability for a very large grocer. And they saw very low adoption. They thought that they were going to get a lot of stickiness with shift swapping and give people the ability to pick up shifts at other stores. And what they found out, as kind of when we saw that the adoption wasn't where we wanted it to be, we ended up going out and talking to users. And we found out very quickly that while people liked the idea of swapping shifts inside of their location, there wasn't a lot of shifts to pick up as a result of that. And while there were lots of shifts to pick up at other stores, those stores were not convenient to get to. They were maybe 10 miles away from where their home store was, and there wasn't a good way for the worker to get from one store to another. So even though cross-store scheduling was available, it wasn't something people could use. So we had to shift our strategy in terms of what functionality we wanted to make available and where we wanted to plant our flag, and things like communication of upcoming promotions and things like that started to become that sticky thing that drove more people to use the system. So monitoring and tracking and usage is absolutely critical. Kind of coming back, and it's critical to drive that ROI. And the earlier you catch it, the faster you can correct it, and the faster you can get back on path. The other thing to keep in mind is that while you can implement very, very quickly, and again, we've implemented some very large customers in a matter of weeks that gotten them up and running and seeing value right away. Long-term value, it's going to take a while to get everything deployed. The more complex your strategy is, the more pieces that you want to offer, the more time it's going to take. Also, you want to go in making sure that you're set up right under the covers. So making sure that you've got those policies, making sure that you've got kind of communication in place so people know what's coming and how they're expected to use it, when they can use it, etc. The other thing that happens if you're looking at using a third party is integration does take time. That doesn't mean that you can't get up and running quickly. You certainly can, but really to have seamless integration between your mobile solution and your WFM system and maybe learning system or other systems that you want to plug in, it will take a little bit of time, and that just needs to be factored into your roadmap and your ROI. Nevertheless, you can start getting value very quick, and I think that then you can achieve more value over time.
I also want to add to this, which is we're right at the end of our time, and the one thing that you have to also remember is not doing anything is actually not a solution, really, in terms of mobility, right? I mean, we've talked about you really can't put your head in the sand at this point. You've got to understand that things are happening out on your locations, on your sites, and in the stores. Whether you believe it or not, they are already doing something, right? Whether it's shift swapping in some way, or even if it's just a text base that they've started, there is something going on. And you risk not having the visibility. And I think back to Lindsay's question, which was, you know, this chicken and the egg and adoption, and how do I get to that point of knowing what the right number is? If you just let this settle in, things are happening behind the scenes. And if you control it, you can control the dialogue, the communication. And I get to use this word again, which is gamification could actually make it fun and a way for them to come to the device, right? So it's a way for them to want to use the application. Is there anything else you guys would add there about not doing anything?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd kind of add is that it's becoming the norm now. You know, there was a time when this was cutting edge to be offering this type of thing. I think those days are long gone. We're in the year of 2021. It's kind of, especially with the workforce getting younger, this is expected. You know, people expect to be able to digitize the organization, to be able to access information when they want. They expect to be able to do that. And I think that the risk that organizations take is that they become a kind of a less attractive employer to the employee workforce. And when you have a kind of a gig economy environment where you potentially have workers that work across organizations and want life to be simple and digital, I think that you kind of run the risk of kind of getting left behind if you don't have a platform.
Yeah, and I really think that you know, from an IT security perspective as well, you know, the risk of not doing something is that your employees are going to do this anyway. They're going to form a Facebook group. They're going to use WhatsApp. They're going to be doing this whether you provide a solution or not. And that means that you lose control of your corporate data. That means that, you know, people are posting schedules and things like that outside of your four walls or virtual walls, and that creates IT security and compliance problems. So taking control of your mobile experience, kind of is vital to plugging that security hole.
That's excellent. Thanks. So guys, thank you for hanging on. This is, we're right at the time. In fact, we're a little bit over, but we obviously like to leave you guys with the, what's next? What can you be thinking about? And, you know, how can Axiom really help you? And there are so many different ways, as you're going to see, as I start to populate this screen, strategic decisions you have to make about mobility overall, just in general. I mean, just overall from the higher level perspective, and then bringing that down into actionable items through a roadmap. Your business case that you need to provide to all the right people, right? And really making a true impact, because sometimes mobility feels squishy and it's a feel good thing. So how do we bring this into the numbers for you? How do we help with the vendor selection? You saw it's very crowded, and we did not even put up all of the names of the potential vendors that you could be including into your dialogue. So we can help with that vendor selection by mirroring your business case, your business requirements with what the vendors can help you with. And then implementation of these tools, while they might seem fast and you can just turn them on, so many things go around each one of the areas. How many channels of communication, and who's talking to whom, and who's answering questions, and what am I allowing? There is so much that needs to be thought about during the implementation. Then the integration, as Bob mentioned earlier, integrating between a lot of different, you have a lot of information coming in. So there's a lot of different modules, other sources that you're going to need to integrate with. And then of course, the last thing, and Lindsay asked that great question of how do we get these, the adoption rates up? Like, what is that right number? You've got to be prepared to make sure that you have change management in place to drive them to this tool, whatever your tool may be at the end of the day. So as usual, we always want to hear from you guys. Our emails are up here for Bob, for Andrew, and myself. How was the webinar? What did you learn from it? Is there anything specific you're doing? We would love to just gather more information and understand what does going mobile mean to you? And again, thanks so much for hanging on for the last few minutes here. We were worried we might not even make it to 45 minutes, but look at us. We usually know we can, right? We could go on forever. This is a great topic of discussion, you guys. We might have one more chat. Just want to make sure we get everybody out here. Let's see. Bob, do you see that anywhere? It's not coming up on mine. I'm
sorry, Robin, what was that?
I thought I saw one more chat come through.
Just a few people saying thank you. So thank you to them.
Okay, guys, have a wonderful day, evening, morning, whatever it is where you are. We are so thankful to have you with us. Thanks from Axiom, and Andrew and Bob, thank you so much for all of the intelligence around this.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
guys.
Goodbye.